Good evening. Welcome to the workshop Applying to Graduate School. Where do I start? Tonight's workshop is hosted by the SUNY Orange Foundation. My name is Jen DeAndrea. I'm the Director of Alumni Relations. And in just a few minutes, you're going to be hearing from an alumni, Amanda Nowak. She is the presenter for tonight. And I want to ask that during the presentation, if you could just keep your microphone on mute. We do have a small group tonight, so we're going to be having some time at the end of the presentation to allow for some questions. So if you want to just wait till the end and then we'll open it up for questions. Feel free to chat, use the chat to introduce yourself. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Amanda.
Great, thanks so much, Jen. And not to worry that this is a small crowd. I honestly think that's better in some ways because there are so many different directions that you can go for graduate school that having the ability to have case-by-case types of questions actually can make it just more applicable. So not to worry that it's a small group. I think that'll make it that much more enriching. So everyone, my name is Amanda Nowak. I am currently the director of the Prison Education Partnership at the University of Maine at Augusta. I am going to go a little bit into my background, not because I think it's brag worthy by any means, but because it is a little bit of a path that might seem non-traditional, but I want to highlight that because during my time in graduate school and into my career, I realized that pretty much everyone is on a non-traditional path. So non-traditional actually ends up being the norm more often than not. So this is just a little bit of my story, but so many other people's stories are like this, where they're not sure really what they want to do and they change gears several times and somehow it all works out and they end up in graduate school and they still end up in a career that's seemingly unrelated, but still within the wheelhouse and their graduate degree is useful. So I'm from Middletown. I actually did a program where in my senior year of high school, I went to SUNY Orange part-time, and I went to Middletown High School part-time. And then I added more SUNY Orange classes to the point where I was a full-time student. And then I went to college. Originally, I was pre-med. I went to a four-year school at Lehigh University. I was pre-med, and I just decided it wasn't for me. I didn't really know what else to do, but I started taking psychology classes. I thought, oh, psychology, great minor to have with this biology pre-med focus. And I just fell in love with the classes, especially child development. That's what I wanted to do, and I really wanted to help children and families. And so it was at that time I'm thinking, okay, what are my next steps? You know, pre-med, it's a natural transition to med school, but I didn't really have any guidance for what do you do with a psychology degree. And so my department actually offered this, how to differentiate between experimental psychology and clinical psychology. And I went to this presentation, and it was graduate school in those fields. And I went to that presentation and I still walked away with, I still have no idea what experimental graduate psychology is and what graduate clinical psychology is. Like it wasn't helpful because I needed help steps before that. And no one was coming in at that foundational level. So I luckily went to a mentor, a faculty advisor who really helped get me some research experience and walked me through the process. And ultimately, I ended up applying to a bunch of different schools and decided to go to the University of Notre Dame for both my master's and my PhD. But without that faculty member, I would have been so lost. I really wouldn't have even known what graduate school was or what it entailed or what careers it could have unlocked. And then I decided, you know, partway through that, I realized, you know, what my degree was going for was to be a professor and do research. And while I liked it, I still wasn't having the impact that I wanted because I wanted my research to help children and families, but I realized the only, you know, the publications, my research is getting published and you have to pay to access it. Usually the only people who are accessing it are students or faculty members at universities where their school pays a subscription so that people can access it for free. And so I didn't want any part of that. I wanted to directly help people. And so I started just getting involved in different administrative roles, and I realized I loved administration. I felt like, to me, that had a very direct support pathway for students, to help students and to help people. And I also at that time started teaching incarcerated students. And it was just like light bulb went off in my head. I knew that I wanted to do administrative work, but specifically with incarcerated populations, because I loved bringing education to people who it would really improve their lives and make their lives better. So again, nothing majorly brag-worthy there, but it is a very seemingly non-traditional path. It is not linear. And that's the path that I see more often than not when people are interested in going to graduate school. So if you are considering graduate school, there are a lot of different things that you might want to consider. So definitely why, what's the reasoning behind it? How can you get the most out of it? And why do you want to get the most out of it? Is it for financial reasons? Is it for you're just in love with a specific area of study? Is it career focused? Maybe you're just delaying the real world, which is to an extent what I did myself. Can't say I necessarily recommend that, but there are a lot of reasons why you might be considering graduate school. And then the last question that you do want to ask too is, are you ready? And it's okay, not everybody is ready. And in a lot of cases, it may make sense to wait a little bit. And hopefully at the end of this presentation, you'll really walk away with the tools to be able to make an informed decision. So I'm not going to sit here and say, you'll know at the end of this whether you want to go to grad school or not, but at least you'll be able to walk away with the important factors for you to consider when you are really sitting down and thinking about, is this for me? If so, what direction do I want to go in, and so on. So the way I see it is that there are two different pathways that can drive your graduate school trajectory. So the first one is a career-driven path. First, it might be you have a career goal in mind. And if that's the case, you're sort of working backwards from that. What is the education that you're going to need to reach your career goal? When does it make sense to go to graduate school based on that career goal? So for some programs, they actually want you, and for some careers, they actually want you to go work out in the field before you get that graduate degree. So one example is a master's in business administration, an MBA. They actually, more often than not, the admissions in those graduate schools want you to have 5 years of experience out in the workforce, versus other programs who they say, come as you are. You have experience, great. If you don't, that's great too. So based on the career path that you want and the education that you want, you should look at when it makes sense to go to graduate school. And then this question applies for both paths. How do you finance your graduate school? And I'll go into a little bit of that on another slide. The second path is starting from the beginning and moving forward. So you find a field that you love. You can go to graduate school and then you can say, okay, what career options does this particular field and having a graduate degree in this particular field afford me? And then you can sort of tailor. So that's sort of what I did. I fell in love with psychology. I just went for it. I got a graduate degree, changed career options a couple of times, and it ultimately, the graduate degree helps me in my field every day. But this particular field, I didn't dream I'd be in prison education ever. It was so far off. But I used the second path to say, okay, this is the education I want, and here are the doors that it's going to open. You do want to ask yourself, how far can you or should you go with your education? Sometimes, and I'll use engineering as an example, financially, you don't make that much more money with a PhD in engineering compared to a master's in engineering. So sometimes it doesn't make sense to get that PhD. Maybe a master's is really creates the most successful option for you. So that's definitely something you should consider. And then again, how do you finance school? And regardless of your path, that's going to be a big question. So this is another thing that I would like to highlight, is that there are different types of graduate degrees. And so there are professional degrees, and these are the degrees that enable you to work in a specific career. So example, a master's in social work, a master's in business administration, a master's in public health. Doctorate level examples would be a law degree, a medical doctor degree, a dentist, a physical therapist, etc. On the academic side, the degree enables you to be a content expert in your field. So it's sort of that you like a particular school subject and that's what your major is in. It doesn't basically set you up on a path for licensure to get licensed as a professional in that field, but instead you just become an expert in that field. So like biology, psychology, English, history, that's a more academic graduate degree, and you can get a master's or a doctorate degree in those types of fields. So when we look at academic master's versus PhD, both of these types of degrees are going to give you a tailored education in that subject that you love. Career opportunities could vary for your academic master's or your PhD. So it is something that, even if you are driven by that academic path, you still want to keep in the back of your head, if you do have a career goal in mind, what's going to be best. Now, there are some key differences with the degree. Mainly, I highlighted some of them here, but I'm going to tell you guys a little bit of a trick since this is a small group. What a lot of people don't know is you can get your master's along the way. So you don't necessarily, if you have experience in maybe research or working in a related field and you feel like you're a competitive applicant, you don't necessarily need to first sign up for a master's program and then sign up for a PhD program. If you sign up for a PhD program right away, you can get your master's along the way. And what the benefit is that usually then it's funded and you get paid to go. So in a lot of full-time doctorate level programs, they pay you to be a graduate research assistant, a teaching assistant, et cetera, and they fully cover your tuition. And this is for standard programs like biology, psychology, English. There's like some, I think, newer fields like leadership, for example, where those PhDs aren't, or conflict resolution, those types of subjects aren't sort of those shoo-ins to get your tuition covered. But usually in those traditional courses, your tuition will get covered in a PhD program. And there's a lot more scholarships out there as well, even if they're not. And sometimes those scholarships just pay you to go. And then usually by working as a graduate assistant, either teaching or research, you'll get paid on top of your tuition already being covered by the school. So this is like the secret information that a lot of programs won't tell you, is that to get a free master's, say you want a master's, either you know that from the start or you want your PhD and then you change your mind after you get your master's and realize it's not for you. If you go straight to that PhD program just to start and you decide you're done after you get your master's for whatever reason, at least it was free. You still walk away with your master's and it's covered. Versus if you are just going and starting with a master's only program, 9 times out of 10, you're paying tuition. And so sure, it might make the most sense for you. And I'm not discouraging anyone from that. A lot of my students, they prefer to, have baby steps as they go and they work on getting scholarships or teaching assistantships, and that's completely fine. But if you know you're going to be a full-time graduate student, you know that it's in a traditional field, you apply and you realize my master's program is not funded, but the PhD program is, it doesn't, it could be a viable option. So I just want to put that out there. Not a lot of people are aware of that. It does come with more work. Sometimes a thesis or type of project or research requirement is required for master's, not always. It's always required for a PhD. You'll be doing research, you'll be writing a dissertation, and it's a lot. Master's also has flexibility in terms of full-time versus part-time usually. You can have different start dates, so you can start at any semester, whereas traditionally PhD programs, you're only starting in the fall. If you're really unsure, but you want to go to graduate school, you can always apply to both master's and PhD programs, especially because those go straight into PhD programs are more competitive. Having those master only programs that are easier to get into could also be your fallback option. So that's a perfectly viable option as well. So I have some examples just because my background is in psychology. I knew where to look for this, but I'm sure it applies to other fields as well. I just want to show you sort of the career prospects and how relevant that subject is for the area of study that you're doing. So with this example, out of 129 different occupation categories, people who major in psychology as their undergraduate degree, there are a total of 92 different categories they're working in on this survey. When you look at how many of them actually believe that their degree is relevant, 62% say, yeah, psychology is sort of relevant to what I do, but only 27% believe their jobs are closely related to psychology. And so that's for bachelor's. But when we see this go up, so we look at master's degree now, well, now the total number of different job categories is actually decreasing. But you see the relevance of your degree increasing. So we're jumping from closely related to psychology with a bachelor's degree being 27% all the way to 70%. That's very drastic. And it's not to say you can't open yourself up to other options, because you totally can. But usually you have that track in your mind of, here's a path I want to go down. And so you're narrowing that path for yourself, but you're also enabling you to be more qualified for more specific jobs as well. And lastly, we look and the jobs for a doctorate degree narrow even further. So we started out with 90 something different categories down to 60 categories. And now closely related to psychology becomes 85%. And again, we started from 20 something percent, 27% with bachelor's. So I show this as an example just to show you, usually the sort of more junior degrees like bachelor's degrees or associate's degrees will give you the broadest career range, but it's going to be most likely, more often than not, the least relevant to the field of study that you're interested in. But as you move up to those more advanced degrees, your career type is going to get more specialized, and it's going to become just more relevant. At the end of the day, you still have to decide what's going to be most worth your time, your energy, your money, your career goals, because, as much as I love psychology, a lot of the jobs I ended up applying to when I realized I didn't want to become a professor, they required a master's. Do I think that my PhD was a waste? Absolutely not. I use a lot of those skills every day, but I can't say that I necessarily fall in that category of psychology is extremely relevant, maybe closely, but that's about it. And so, maybe if I knew this was my path, maybe I would have done something different. I can't say for sure, but that's a personal decision that you have to make to really weigh out what's going to be worth it to you. And sometimes it just doesn't make sense to, as ambitious as you are, go all the way. It's a smarter decision not to, and that's something that you have to decide for yourself. So let's say, theoretically, you know exactly what degree you want, but now you have to determine what's going to be the best program for you. This is going to be the one thing that not many people are going to tell you, but it is so important. It's a national statistic that 50% of graduate students drop out. And I've seen around me, my peers drop out like flies. And I'll tell you the two biggest reasons. One, the school or the program was just not a good fit. The community, and I mean that even in the broader community, the area that they were living in, the values, whether it's political or religious, et cetera, it was just not a good fit. Advisor issues too. So in some graduate degrees, you are assigned an advisor, and you do have some say in that in most cases. And they oftentimes maybe went for who's the most famous or the most reputable advisor, but they're a miserable person to work with. And then they end up dropping out because if they had known either the right questions to ask or how important well-being was going to be, they might have made a different decision. And so I really urge you, when you are looking at what school might be the best fit for me, to take the community into account. It's such a huge regret. And I mean this on campus and off campus. Definitely do your research. I didn't. And I'll tell you, putting someone born and raised in New York in South Bend, Indiana, it was not the best experience for me. And, I stuck it out, and I don't have any regrets. I'm not the type of person to live with regrets, but I think I would have been happier in other places. And that weighs down on you a lot. That's a big factor. You want to find an environment that you can thrive in. It's not going to be like your undergraduate school where, there are offices putting on these events for you or bringing your classmates together. You have to sort of fend for yourself when it comes to that socialization aspect. Also demographics of your peers, and it's fully okay to ask these questions. Sometimes if you are maybe fresh out of undergrad, but all of the other graduate students in your program maybe were in the workforce for an average of 10 years and then went back to grad school. Well, you might be the odd one out, and it might not be as good of a fit for that reason. The reverse might be true as well. So definitely consider those factors of who's around you, what the community is like, other factors like cost of living versus the financial package that they're offering you. I will say the one good thing about South Bend, and this is partially why I made my decision, was that the cost of living was the least, and Notre Dame paid me the most to go. And so I was able, so graduate students actually buy their houses and more often than not versus renting. Versus I've went to other schools, for example, I interviewed in Maryland, and they said, we still have to borrow money for our parents because even though our tuition is covered and they're paying us something, it's not enough with how much the cost of living is here. So definitely take those factors into account. Also, you want to look at your priorities, and when it comes to the work-life balance and the type of programming, some programs are more flexible than others. Some have more of an emphasis on the coursework versus some have more of an emphasis on the research or the practice and getting your practice in, if it's something like therapy hours or social work hours. So you definitely want to see what are you most wanting to get out of the program and what that program offers, and try to see what lines up there. Also read your mission statement. Listen, and I don't mean to talk so negatively about Notre Dame. Truthfully, I'm really grateful for the degree, but I did not do my research on their values. And I've heard from many students, this isn't just my experience, that healthcare and women's access to healthcare types of issues are a big reason why people either do not go to Notre Dame or they get there and then they decide to leave. And maybe that's a huge important value to you. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's, our values disagree, but I can live with it. That's okay too. But know in advance what you're getting into, because the values of the university can absolutely make a difference. And this is the best piece of advice I can give to you. Talk to the graduate students. They have nothing to lose. Advisors or the graduate program, they're going to want to entice you to go there. It's their job to get enrollment numbers up because that means more money for the university. But graduate students do not have that same, stake involved. So they're going to be honest with you. And that's what you need when you're making your decision. Feel free to even contact them in advance. Usually websites will tell you that each department will have the graduate students and their emails on there. Contact them in advance and just have a conversation. You might decide to not apply rather than asking them after you've already applied and paid an application fee. But they'll be honest. And I've really relied on them to discourage me from accepting certain, schools, because I realized that's not an advisor I want to be working under. And to clarify, advisors are a little bit different in graduate school. I don't say advisor in the sense of this person's going to help me with picking out the classes. Rather, advisors are people you're usually working for. You're doing research for, you're helping teach for them, et cetera. So they're essentially your boss, and you don't want a miserable boss. And graduate students will tell you if the advisor is a miserable boss. So definitely take advantage of them. The only thing I will say is know your audience. It's not the time to talk bad about that advisor. I've actually seen that backfire, because they will relay up the chain to what they think of you. So they're open to you asking them any question, but just remember, they might have some say in if you're selected or not. And if you come off as completely unprofessional, that can, put your chances at risk if you really do like that school. So when you're determining where to apply, it's going to vary based on your field. Some fields like psychology, you are actually more so applying to the advisor than you are the school. Advisors will be given so much funding each year, whether it's directly from the university or from a grant. And so if they have that funding, oftentimes they'll be accepting students. But if they don't have that funding, they might refer you to a colleague or just say, no, sorry, I'm not taking on any students this year. So that's sometimes how it works. But in other fields, like biology, for instance, or philosophy, if you're more interested in the humanities, you're just applying to the school itself. So this is important, because I went to Notre Dame. I said, oh, Notre Dame, it's such a prestigious school. It was actually not that big in psychology research. If I wanted to go to a place that was big in psychology research, I would have went to Missouri or Michigan or Wisconsin. It's hard to believe that there are some places that could potentially be worse than Indiana, but I didn't really take that into account, and I definitely wouldn't have wanted to go to some of those places. That's just me. But you're not always applying to the school. You want to go where it's, what's the best chance for you, but also leverage that again against, you want to make sure you have a good, your well-being is in a good place. And sometimes, those bigwigs, the reason why they're so famous is because they're taking credit for a lot of the work graduate students are doing. And you don't want to find yourself in a situation like that. That's why talking to the graduate students are so important, because they'll tell you, we're busting our butts, and our advisor's just taking all the credit for it. That's why he's so famous. So I've seen that happen. But anyway, happy to talk more on that. But if you have questions on that. But so in those circumstances, you're applying to the person. In other fields, you're applying to the school. It doesn't matter. You'll get matched with an advisor. And so you want to know going into it, what type of situation? Am I applying just to the program? Am I applying to an advisor? How does that work? You also want to look at employment prospects. So a lot of times, the department websites for these graduate schools will tell you placements for recent graduates of those programs. And so maybe you are interested in going into industry or a particular career versus you want to go in a different direction, maybe like a practice route. So you're actually out in the field doing some sort of human services. If you're looking at their graduate students' placements and they're all going in one path, and you want to go in a completely different path career-wise, then that program might not be the best program for you. So oftentimes different schools and different departments and programs, their expertise may be to prepare students for a very particular career goal. So like I said, one way to really just weed that out is to see where are recent graduates going, and feel free to use resources like LinkedIn. You can look up alumni that way, do a little online stalking. That's perfectly viable when you're picking out graduate schools. So, and usually those graduate students too, even if you don't know them, but you find them on LinkedIn, they'll be more than happy, those alumni of those programs, to talk to you as well. So when you are, let's say you do have to figure out an advisor that you're working with, send them an email early on. You don't want to pay $150 to apply for a school, and then turns out that advisor is not accepting any students. So feel free, and you should, months in advance, send them a very personalized email and say, hey, I'm really interested in this work that you do. I particularly like XYZ. Show that you've done your research on them, and say, I'm also looking to go to graduate school. I was wondering if you were accepting any students to work under you. And you can even do this if you're not applying to work under one particular professor. Like, that's not how your program works. Your program is just, you get into the program and you later get matched. At least that way, you found one person that likes you and you like them, and later on, you guys can pair up. There will be a greater chance that you can work with that person if you establish that relationship early on. So definitely feel free to contact those potential advisors in advance. Half of them won't respond. Don't take it personal. It's just the way professors can be sometimes, and that's what it is. So it's nothing against you if a lot of them don't respond. The research that they do should excite you. You're going to dedicate several years to this. If you're in a master's, 1 to 3. If you're in a PhD, 5 to 7. So you should make sure their work actually excites you. And mentoring style is very important. Again, talk to the grad students in this area. They'll tell you this person's a micromanager. I had other students tell me, so-and-so is really nice. He's great. He's very personable, but he's also 80 years old. And he actually only had one eyebrow, which is a funny little anecdote, but he has nothing to prove. And oftentimes graduate students, they want to be successful. They need to push publications out to be successful. That 80-year-old advisor is not it. He has no reason to push any more publications out because he's doing just fine himself. He's on his way out. I'm surprised, people stick around in academia probably longer than they should in some cases. So he's not pumping out publications. So just something to keep in mind, that mentoring style is going to be very important to you. So now you've maybe limited a number of schools you want or programs you want. I would say definitely have a good handful. You always want backups, but just keep in mind there will be application fees. However, there's usually waivers you can get, either partial or full waivers. So if the application fee ends up becoming a barrier, reach out to the admissions office and explain that to them, and they might be able to help you out. So it can get pretty costly, but just to remember, usually schools do want to be as equitable as possible. So they usually have some flexibility in those application fees. And I apologize if this is really small. I'm going to walk through it, and this recording is also going to be available, so you can zoom into the recording if you'd like. But I wanted to show you what this timeline would look like. And this is a very common path if you're looking to sort of start in the fall. There's no rolling admissions or starting part-time or starting off that fall schedule. But 1 year to 8 months out, you want to just start doing your research on the schools. 10 to 8 months out, that's when I would recommend contacting potential advisors. Now, I will say more and more schools are doing away with standardized testing, but a lot of them still require it. And so you need to be aware in advance if you're going to have to take a GRE type of test, which is like the SATs, but graduate school level. And I had to take it twice. You know, you might have to take it more than once. So you want to give yourself time. You definitely don't want to take your first one more than 2 months away from the deadline of your application. Because if you do need to take it again, you need to give yourself that time. I do recommend some sort of preparation. A lot of it is like the SATs. There's a lot of tips and tricks along with it, and you don't, going in blind is going to hurt your score. So carve out time to prepare for the exams if you need it. What's probably the most important next to contacting advisors and forming a relationship early on is your personal statements, or they might have an essay, like a research goals or type of essay. This is going to be a defining factor. Quite honestly, a lot of places are leaning more towards these qualitative types of assessments. What you can do is usually they're all going to be similar. They're either going to be between 500 to 1,000 to 2,000 words. They're going to ask you sort of the same types of things. And so what you can do is develop a template and then tweak it for each application. You definitely want to tweak it. You want to name drop advisors or researchers or professors at the university, name drop the work that they've done, and how you can be collaborative and with all of these different people, like show that you've done the research for that particular school. Because it just adds a personal touch. It makes it look like you didn't just, oh, I'm just applying and throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks. That's going to hurt your application, and you're probably not going to get in if you approach it from a situation like that. Also, it's a good opportunity because you likely will need between 1 to 3 letters of recommendation. Having, even if it's a draft, and actually asking your letter writers to give feedback on it, but also you're killing 2 birds with 1 stone, because you're giving them an opportunity to read sort of the personal side of you. They might know some pieces here and there, but they don't know the holistic picture of you. And so it's a great opportunity to give your letter writers more to talk about. And then also feel free, because you're going to have to do this a few months out. You're likely going to have to harass them, because sometimes it's very hard to get, responses back from faculty in a timely manner. So definitely give them a lot more time. Even tell them even though the graduate school deadline is this date, your personal deadline is, 2 weeks before then. So just in case they're behind, you have the opportunity to keep following up and hounding them until you finally get it. But they can actually help you on your personal statement, and you can send them a CV or a resume too. So give them everything and ask them to write a strong letter for you, because many people can write a letter, but you don't just need a letter, you need a strong letter. And if they say no, take that as a blessing in disguise, because they probably wouldn't have been able to write you a good letter if they're not comfortable writing you a strong letter. And then lastly, for that standard application cycle, your applications are going to be due between November 15th to December 15th. Excuse me. And then usually by April-ish, usually April 15th, you have to make a decision. So they let you know a little bit earlier. I've been contacted as early as February and as late as early April to make a decision. Or they give you a decision, and then usually have until April 15th, unless you're put on a wait list. They might give you some extended time beyond that. So I jumped the gun. There's some of the things I've already said. One thing that a lot of people don't know, this is another secret, you can negotiate a little bit in some cases for more money when you're applying to a PhD program in particular. For instance, I've seen some people negotiate moving costs. I personally just said, do you have anything? I wrote a carefully crafted letter saying I was accepted into so many schools. You can use that as leverage. And now I'm trying to make my decision, and it could be coming down to numbers. I need to do what's going to be best for my future? Are you aware of any fellowships or additional funding sources? And so they replied to me, the potential advisor said, yes, I can look into this. What are the amounts the other schools are offering you? So you can't really bluff. They wanted that proof. But then they came back with an offer that I think was about $3,000 more each year because I asked. And again, it could be very hit or miss. It can depend on their budget. It can depend on like the broader universities, scholarships and fellowships that they offer. But treat this like a job in the sense that you could get more money out of it if you negotiate some of those things. So just keep that in mind. If you are just applying to a master's program, there could be, the admissions might have some scholarships available. They might have a grants and fellowships office that might be aware of, even if it's external and it has nothing to do with that particular university, they might be aware of external funding sources. Your potential advisor might have some ideas. So it's always worth asking. I just I've not seen as much success in a master's programs as I have in PhD programs. So what can you do now? If there's any way for you to get direct experience, if you're not already doing so, I recommend doing that. If you're currently in a four-year school where there is an honors thesis or a senior thesis available, definitely I recommend that. But I will tell you that I've seen people in four-year schools that didn't have that option, and they just worked with a faculty member to make up their own thesis. They didn't need to do it for any college credit or part of any program. So you can carve out your own path if that's something that you're interested in, and don't be shy about that. I think faculty members are really excited when they see undergraduates passionate and excited and wanting to learn more, and see if you can help them. Maybe they don't have, doing any concrete research going on right now, but they're working on some publications. Maybe you can ask if you can help write sections, because publications are huge. If you have a publication under your belt, you'll have a much greater chance of getting into graduate school. Don't worry if you don't, not required. That's usually what graduate school is for, but it looks really impressive if you can do that. Present at conferences if you have the opportunity as well. If that sort of doesn't really fit with your situation very well, or like maybe you can look into internships at different labs, or it doesn't have to be science oriented. It could be disseminating at relevant organizations. So I know some people work in the libraries and they put on presentations to the community, things like that, things that are relevant to education. Or in psychology example, we see a lot of people that just worked at a local autism center. It wasn't academically related, but it was still relevant to psychology. So if there are opportunities for you to engage in ways that are still relevant to the field, that will certainly help. Any volunteering or service can help. Just engagement in general, so organizations, clubs, etc. Look for opportunities to develop your writing skills, your analytical skills, your professional skills. And what I think is very valuable is seek mentorship, find someone, and feel free again to use like the alumni networks at SUNY Orange or elsewhere. See where there are professionals in the field and ask them to mentor you. There's nothing wrong with reaching out. Probably the worst they're going to do is not answer. You won't even get a no. You just won't get answered. And I feel like in some cases that's better than a no. I don't deal well with direct rejection. But oftentimes they'll say yes, and they'll be willing to have a 30-minute Zoom conversation with you, or offer to give you guidance back and forth. So definitely seek some advice from someone who's walked that path. I've touched on this a little bit already, but feel free, especially if you're getting down to writing cover letters or resumes or essays, take advantage if you have these resources at SUNY Orange, or if you are affiliated with another campus at this point, feel free to tap into that. Sometimes just building those polishing skills for essays is make or break, and it makes you so much more ready when you're actually in your graduate program and you have to write regularly. Career services could be a great resources for if you need to submit resumes to graduate school. They can help you because they help with resumes professionally. Also, employee incentives. This is one last piece of advice that I didn't really touch on. Some employers will pay for you to get a graduate degree. It's obviously going to depend on the employer, but if your employer has incentives to help you, feel free to take advantage of that and explore options, even if it's a professional development. Maybe they give their employees $1,500 a year for professional development or something. Ask if you can apply that to your graduate school in some way. But that's something you can look into now just to start getting an idea of what resources are available to me. So that is my spiel. I would love to open it up if there are any questions, or to get to know you and what field you're interested in, what stage you're at. It's easier for me to get through the spiel and then answer questions. So if there are questions, I'm happy to go back and talk about anything. Just let me know. But I can ramble, so I'm going to stop there.
Hi, Amanda. I'm Allie.
Hi, Allie.
I wanted to know who is funding your PhD when you are, pursuing it. Is it the college? Is it government funded?
Mine in particular, or just PhDs in general?
In general.
It really is going to vary. That's a good question. So what fields are you interested in going in, may I ask?
I'm still not positive. I'm almost kind of asking for my sister because she's interested in chiropractic and also botany, and she's not sure which one she wants to pursue. So those.
Okay. So chiropractic or botany, did I hear that right?
Correct.
Okay, those are very different things.
Very different.
So chiropractic, that is more of a professional master's or professional doctorate level career. And so usually those are self-pay because it's really just helping you versus with other graduate fields, you were giving back. And that's sort of the justification for why your tuition is covered and why you're getting paid to go. So unfortunately, and there might be stuff out there, don't get me wrong, but unfortunately, usually you're going to be self-pay. Botany, on the other hand, there's like a huge research component that you can do. You can teach classes on it as you're going to school. And that type is going to really depend on your advisor. So usually the school will front you and the school will say, we'll get you started with, we're going to cover your tuition, we're going to pay you. And then once you're placed with an advisor, they're going to have funding for you. And they can either have funding from the school or they can have a grant. And that grant could be a federal grant. It could be just a nonprofit organization grant. It might be like the National Institute of Health or the CDC or something like that. So it really depends on the specific situation, but I think there's a much, much greater chance of botany being covered than chiropractor types of fields. And there's also more fellowships out there. So I'll put this in the chat because it might be hard to remember. It's called the NSF GRFP, and that's due every fall. And they will not only pay for your full tuition, they will pay you $34,000 a year to go to graduate school. And you can get it does your sister have a master's already?
No, she is completing her bachelor's this spring.
Okay, perfect. So you can either apply it to a master's or a bachelor's, but you cannot apply if you already have your master's. There's like a lot of weird eligibility requirements to it, but you can apply to that as an undergrad, and applying to an award like that is actually really helpful. If you win something like that in your senior year, you actually can take that and say, hey, I want to go to your school because the NSF, the National Science Foundation, is going to pay my tuition and they're going to pay me to go. And so you likely will have your pick of any graduate school in existence because that's free money to the school, and they don't have to worry about compensating you at all for, I think it lasts 4 years. So I know that was a really long, sorry,
No,
Allie,
that's
that was
great.
a really long
Really great.
answer, but bottom line is botany will usually have a much greater chance of being funded, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of scholarships and fellowships out there for that versus there might be some stuff for chiropractor, but it'll be slim pickings.
Thank you.
Mhm. Any other questions?
I just wanted to also say that I know in the last slide, Amanda put her email address. So I'm sure if you have any questions, by all means, follow up. And I'm going to put my email in the chat as well. I'll be following up with you regardless with the recording for tonight's workshop. But I just want to encourage you, if you have questions, as Amanda said in her presentation, reach out, talk to people, ask questions, ask for help. The college is here always to help our alumni. We have a career services office that would be more than willing to help out in any adventure that you have. Going once, do we have any more questions? I don't want to cut everybody off yet. I think we're good.
Either I bored everyone, or I was just so thorough that all of their questions are answered.
Very thorough.
I think you were very, very thorough. I'm very thankful to you. And Amanda is an alumnus of the College of Orange County Community College, SUNY Orange. She is volunteering her time tonight to present this workshop. If you are an alum of the college and if there's any opportunities that you want to get involved in, Allie as well has volunteered her time for career services for our workshops. There's a number of opportunities for our alumni to get involved here at the college. If there's anything that you are interested in, by all means, feel free to reach out at any time. I do just want to thank Amanda. I want to thank the three of you for participating tonight and logging on. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And I just want to thank Jen for organizing this, and also just to anyone, please feel free. I know Jen mentioned it already, but please contact me if you want further assistance. I've done this a lot for undergraduates at University of Notre Dame. This is like, I was telling Jen, I can recite this stuff in my sleep, and I did this professionally for a year. I didn't get into all of that, but I helped graduate students find scholarships and fellowships. So even if that's something that's interested in you, I'm happy to walk you through how to find fellowships and scholarships for graduate school. Just any step of the graduate school process is really sort of where I can shine, and I feel like I can help most. So please don't hesitate to contact me.
Thank you so much, Amanda.
Yeah, thanks, Allie.
Thank you so much. We're going to end it here. Again, like I said, reach out if you have any questions, and if not, have a great rest of your night. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.
Good night.
Good night.